Organ meats are a panacea. Check out this review from one of our customers at Heart and Soil Supplements. My teenage son's seborrheic dermatitis cleared up within 3 weeks of taking Heart and Soil organs. My husband's alopecia as well, which is balding of the head or hair loss. My lifelong acne is 100% gone. Migraines and headaches, gone. My energy and mental clarity is out of control. The carnivore-ish diet, also known as an animal-based diet, including fresh and desiccated organs, has been the panacea I've spent my entire adult life looking for. We have always been in the top 10% in terms of health, but now we're in the top 1%. I'm telling as many people who will listen, thank you Carnivore MD and Heart and Soil Supplements. You guys, this is why we do what we do at Heart and Soil Supplements. You can find us heartandsoil.co. We make grass-fed, grass-finished, regeneratively raised organs from the finest animals on the planet. We package them in glass because you know I hate plastic and we don't need more of it in the world. Organs change lives positively, whether they're fresh or desiccated. If you need more organs in your life, and I know many of you do, check us out, heartandsoil.co, that's .co, to reclaim your birthright to radical health. Those of you watching on YouTube will see that the background has changed, and that is because I am traveling right now and had to record this intro kind of off the cuff, but the background is not bad. If you are listening to this, you may go to YouTube to actually see what the background is. Nevertheless, this week's podcast is a fun one with my buddy Evan Brand. You can find him at evanbrand.com. I love podcasting with Evan. We are very aligned mentally on our paradigms, how we see the world, and we just kind of relaxed and talked about all kinds of cool stuff on the podcast today. We talked about why now is the worst time ever to be a vegan or vegetarian. You'll find out why in this podcast. I think all times are a bad time to be a vegan or vegetarian. We talk about mold. We talk about travel. We talk about all kinds of interesting things in this podcast. And I just love riffing with Evan. I'm sure there will be nuggets in here for all of you. Please share it with friends if you find it valuable, or they will find it valuable as well. I think this will help a lot of people. On to the podcast with my buddy Evan Brand. Love you all.
Paul, welcome back.
Good to be here, brother.
Okay, so this could be fun. This could be depressing. It might be both. But I thought, okay, who could I riff with on this idea? And riff in a good way, riff like vibe with. Who could I vibe with and have fun with and talk about the issue that is plaguing society? And it's not a virus. It is the frickin' soil and the nutrients. And then this topic, this podcast title came on my head. Why now is the most dangerous time to be a vegetarian or vegan? I thought, who would be the perfect person to have? Well, none other than the great Dr. Paul Saladino. So here you are.
Awesome. I love it, dude. I agree. This is a very dangerous time to be a vegetarian or a vegan. Absolutely. But the mainstream would tell you otherwise, right? Which is why it's fun to challenge those norms.
Yeah. And so I put together a few little PubMed studies, which we could dive into and look at together if you want to. I guess it depends on how geeky you think that we need to go with this. I mean, I think at the end of the day, people want action steps, but I think it is good that you and I maybe lay some of the groundwork for where are we in nutrient depletion as a society.
Yeah. The other thing I would add to that title is it's also the most dangerous time to be a pescatarian. And we can talk about that too, which is sort of the other side of the equation with microplastics and heavy metals. And then you could say it's also the most dangerous time to brush your teeth.
For sure. Are you talking fluoride?
No, because of the microplastics in toothpaste as well. I was just going down that rabbit hole thinking about this as well.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah, there's microplastics in toothpaste and it's crazy.
And you don't use any toothpaste, is that right?
I don't use any toothpaste. Nothing. People always say, how do you get your teeth white? I don't know if they're like as white as they show up on the video because I have like sunlight coming in. They're not brown. But what I do for my teeth is I don't drink coffee. I don't drink tea. I don't drink things that are going to stain my teeth. I just drink water. And we can talk about the water that I do drink because I've been thinking about water a lot recently. And then I don't use toothpaste because it doesn't make any sense. Like, what is the point of toothpaste? What is the point of fluoride? The point of fluoride is that it is anti-cavity, but then we have all of this questions that are lurking in the dental space about could excess fluoride be harmful for humans? And I think it definitely can be. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that excess fluoride is harmful. You don't want fluoride in your gel. When I was a kid, I go to the dentist and I had these fluoride trays. They put fluoride jelly and they make you sit there and had this weird texture in your mouth and just fluoride all in your mouth. And of course you're swallowing in, getting a huge dose of fluoride as a kid. And then in the toothpaste, a lot of the toothpaste have fluoride and a lot of the water has fluoride. So there's fluoride everywhere. But the reason we're using so much fluoride is because people are massively nutrient deficient. Kind of back to the same, this is why it's so dangerous to be a vegetarian or vegan, because even without looking at soil depletion of nutrients, which we'll get into, a vegetarian or a vegan is likely going to be deficient in vitamin K2 and other fat soluble vitamins. So K2 is menaquinone. You've probably talked about this on your podcast, but K2 is so freaking critical for tooth health, along with D and E and other fat soluble vitamins, which are predominantly found in animal foods. You can't get much of them, if any, in plant foods. Some people would say, oh, natto is fermented soybeans, but the vitamin K2 in natto, I believe, is mostly MK7, not MK4. And I could be wrong, but it's one of those two isoforms of menaquinone. And MK4 is the one you really want. And it's made by bacteria. It's not made by the soybeans. It's made by a fermentation process in the bacteria. So soil depletion of nutrients, yes, but vegetarians and vegans, definitely nutrient deficient, leading to cavities. Cavities are not exclusively the consumption of sugar. Processed sugar isn't a good thing to put in your mouth. You know that I'm not afraid of putting fruit in my mouth or honey in my mouth. I have a very healthy dentition. I don't have any cavities. I eat a lot of honey every day, but I brush my teeth once a day with no toothpaste, and I don't need fluoride because I have tons of fat soluble nutrients from animals in my diet. And that's another reason that I don't use toothpaste, is this idea of microplastics. Like, I don't want anything extra in my toothpaste, whether it's PEG, polyethylene glycol, or these supposed microplastics like poloxamer 404. And there's all kinds of crappy microplastics in toothpaste. Some toothpaste has carrageenan, which is an algal derivative. It's like a long chain molecule from algae that's a thickener that has been shown to be damaging in the human gut. So why would you want more chemicals in your mouth and your diet? That's just a horrible thing for humans. So dangerous time to be a vegetarian or a vegan. Dangerous time to be a pescatarian because of microplastics in the fish. We can talk about that. Dangerous time to brush your teeth with toothpaste. How about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the thing. Like, when you visited the tribes, now I have seen some tribesmen where their dental health looks terrible. Now, are those the ones that had like corn and sugar and stuff brought in from the missionaries?
So there's differences. So if you look at the Maasai generally have big, broad, white smiles. And the Hadza are hunter-gatherers, and a lot of the Hadza have brown stains on their teeth. But the Hadza are well known to be very addicted to tobacco and marijuana. And they also probably have exposure to large amounts of fluoride in the water source. So you're back to fluoride. So I don't know if the Maasai don't have exposure to these fluoride water sources, but even in Tanzania, in the cities, you'll see people who have grown up in the cities and they have these big brown stains on their teeth from fluorosis, from excess fluoride in the water when they're growing up. And this is massive amounts of fluoride in the water in Tanzania. So you get these big brown stains on the teeth, but the Hadza have a lot of those brown stains. And it's hard to know whether that's smoking, marijuana, fluoride in the water, where are they getting it from? Are they getting a contaminated river? But I don't think that the Hadza necessarily have cavities as much as they have a lot of brown stains. People will look at them and be like, their teeth don't look great. But if you look at generally hunter-gatherers like the Maasai, if they don't smoke a lot, they have big, broad, white smiles. I mean, there's tons of examples of this. Weston Price's book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, is the best illustration of big, broad, wide jaws. And the hypothesis would be that adequate fat-soluble nutrition as a child in utero, even into adulthood, helps us get broad jaws with open throats. We call this the pharynx, that aren't prone to sleep apnea. So there's this concern, right, that we breathe through our mouths, number one, because our noses are misformed, or our noses are too narrow because we're not getting enough fat-soluble vitamins in pregnancy, in utero, in our childhood. And then we breathe through our mouths, which causes the chin to be pushed back. We don't have these like really well-formed chins. We don't have good jawbones or wide jaws because of this potentially poor nutrition, evolutionarily inconsistent nutrition throughout our childhood and infancy and all those kinds of things. And again, I had braces when I was a kid. I was probably, deficient in all that stuff when I was a kid too. And my mom wasn't eating liver. She wasn't eating a lot of meat when I was in the womb. Thankfully, I'm sure she was eating some, but my childhood nutrition could have been way better.
Same here. Now, did you get your wisdom teeth out, or do you still have them?
I still have my wisdom teeth, which is probably a good thing. So my jaw is at least big enough to keep wisdom teeth. That I'm proud of.
Good. That's super important. You know how many people get cavitations because the surgeons don't remove the periodontal membrane. So when you pull the teeth out, that's what happened to me. They pulled the wisdom teeth out. They didn't remove the membrane. I started getting heart palpitations out of nowhere. My blood pressure went crazy. Got a x-ray. It was actually a cone beam. And I had this dark, necrotic, literally dead black jawbone under my gums. And I had to go, it was in Texas in Marble Falls. I got a guy to scoop it out. That's what he specialized in, was cavitations. His whole practice is cleaning up bad surgery work on wisdom teeth removal. Dude, it'll make you incredibly sick. So that's good that you still have your wisdom teeth.
Try to keep as many teeth as possible. Yeah, man. Got all my teeth.
It's huge.
And I wish I hadn't had braces, but
I think your teeth look good. Your teeth look good now, though. Wasn't it worth it or no?
Oh, it was worth it. But then there's the question, like, why did I even need braces in the first place? I shouldn't have needed braces. I don't believe that humans should need braces. If you look at hunter-gatherers, generally that don't smoke tons of tobacco or marijuana, like the Hadza, they have white teeth that are all pretty well, aligned. They have pretty straight teeth that come in very nicely. There were members of the Hadza tribe that looked like that, and some did not. So I don't know why some were and some weren't. There's something to study there, but it's not their diet that's doing that. It's not the honey. It's something else. But I think that humans in general, we know the formula, right? It's animal foods, or this is what I believe and you believe. It's animal foods, meat, organs, and then I believe the least toxic plant foods, the fruit and the honey. And especially if you're getting the organs and the fat soluble vitamins, especially K2 and vitamin D, real vitamin D, probably from the sun. Then you're going to make a healthy baby. You're going to make a baby with a big jaw, whether it's a girl or a boy. And that leads to, I think, proper alignment of the teeth and then no cavities. You don't need fluoride in your water. You don't need fluoride in your toothpaste. You don't need microplastics in your toothpaste either.
Hopefully my daughter Summer, my oldest, her cheeks, they already seem hunter-gathererish. They seem broad. She's got almost like that big Native American cheekbone. Her teeth are like perfectly spaced apart. Her mouth seems wide. So hopefully we did a good job in utero with her. Hopefully she'll turn out good.
So she doesn't need braces?
No, I mean, she's going to be 6 this summer. And so far her teeth look absolutely perfect. I mean, she's off to a great start. So
yeah. And what about, how many other kids do you have?
So I have Jenna, who's 2. Oh, okay. And then I have Emma, the 3rd, who's due in 6 weeks.
Congratulations on that. So you only have one daughter who's really big enough to see where the teeth are coming in.
Yeah, Jenna's 2. She has all of her baby, but I can't tell how broad she's going to be yet. So
yeah, I have a niece and a nephew. My niece is 4, my nephew's 2. And I think my sister's feeding them. She's giving them organs from Heart and Soil. So I gave her some of our desiccated organs, and she's emptying them into their food. And I know they're eating a lot of hamburger and meat. So I think they're going to be good. I don't think they're going to need braces. And so my sister and her husband are going to save thousands of dollars on orthodontic work. If parents only knew this, right? That if they just took the few $1,000s that orthodontic work would cost them later in life for their kids, and then not to mention all the opposition of the jaw and all this alignment of the jaw that's going to get messed up when you use braces. And they just invested that over time in quality food for their kids, whether it's little bits of liver or organs or better quality meat. They would save so much. It would be such a better investment. Humans aren't good at this forward thinking, right? We're better at reacting. When we see a kid with crooked teeth, we give them braces. When we get sick, we go to the hospital. We're not good at planning long-term. This is probably an evolutionary trait of ours. But that's why you and I do the work we do, is to help people see long distances into the future and think, okay, it's worth it to invest in high quality nutrient sources for your children now. And that will save you money long-term, and it'll save them because they'll get a jaw that's formed properly from the very beginning.
Isn't it amazing to think that all of our supposed interventions and supposed progress is not really progress after all? Like, why do there need to be orthodontists? Why do there need to be braces and the toothpaste? And like every invention is like totally unnecessary when you look at the people that you've studied and the people that you've visited. For people that haven't yet, look up the podcast that Paul did with Anthony from their trip. It's an incredible, I watched the whole thing. I think it was maybe 2 hours or so about the trip. I think that we're so caught up in this reactionary mindset, we forget that we could be healthy on our own without intervention. Like, what a friggin' simple revolutionary thought.
What a crazy concept. We did two episodes. So my podcast is called Fundamental Health. There's at least 2 episodes now on that. Anthony just did a tweet on Twitter that went viral. He had 1.7 million impressions on this tweet about our trip to Tanzania. And it was so funny because people will respond to it. He was talking about all the things we saw in Tanzania with the Hadza. They don't really prioritize fiber. They don't prioritize vegetables or leaves or stems or roots of plants at all. They'll eat some berries and some fruit. They freaking love honey, and meat and organs are the center of their diet. They eat everything nose to tail. They don't really jog. They walk. They sprint. It was interesting. All these things we learned from the Hadza. They're very happy people. They don't overwork. And then people write in the comments on Twitter, which, is kind of like a monkey shit throwing competition. Oh, but their life expectancy is 33 years old and their infant mortality is 21%. And I'm thinking, don't you understand those two are related? And the infant mortality of 21% actually is what's confounding the life expectancy of 33 years old and making it look like they have a life expectancy of 33 years old, when in fact, if you make it to your teenage years as a hunter-gatherer, whether it's in the Maasai tribe or the Ikung or the Hadza, you live to be the same age as we do in the United States with a much better health span, meaning that their 50-year-olds, their 60-year-olds, even some of their 70-year-olds are out hunting, climbing trees. I saw this when I was there. They're vital and they're virile. How many 50-year-olds do you know who do that kind of stuff? How many 60-year-olds or how many 70-year-olds do you know who are climbing freaking trees and hunting with the tribe and really vital into old age? We can't say that as Westerners. We have this inexorable march toward decrepitude. So yeah, the Hadza are a pretty incredible illustration of that, as are many of these hunter-gatherer or semi-hunter-gatherer pastoralist tribes. Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to mention, because I imagine some people may be thinking this, maybe I have too much troll mind in the back of my head now, is here are you and I, who are not dentists, talking about oral health and talking about fat-soluble vitamins and cavities. And I just push back on this notion of staying in your lane. I had a guy on Instagram make a comment to me today. I did a post on running form because I've done a lot of running in my life. I used to be an ultra runner, an ultra marathoner, and I had multiple injuries. And I eventually sort of discovered that I was running wrong. I was heel striking with my running. So I don't know if you run much, but walking, I really strongly believe there's great evidence from humans all over the world. Just like with diet, we see the same thing mirrored with running form. So you get walking motor pattern is heel toe strike, but running motor pattern is a forefoot strike. And we see this in kids. If kids grow up barefoot, they know this. They run on their forefeet just intuitively, and they walk on their heels. But with our westernization, and this mirrors our food system so much, we've put kids in shoes. We put kids in high-heeled shoes that are stiff, and then kids start running on their heels, and they adapt a walking motor pattern to running, which leads to more ankle injuries, more knee injuries, more back injuries, and generally less enjoyable, less efficient running for humans. And so isn't it fascinating? I was talking about this on my Instagram saying, hey, I think you're running wrong. My shtick is like, this is BS. This isn't BS. So I said, your running form is probably bullshit. And I showed how, a heel strike is not a running motor pattern. And there was a guy in the comments and he was saying, you're spreading misinformation about nutrition. And now you're spreading misinformation about running form. He was like, stay in your lane. You're not qualified to talk about this. And I thought, okay, this is the type of thing that really grinds my gears. When humans are told stay in your lane, like we're not allowed to free think anymore, like somebody actually has to have a qualification in something. These are the people who are usually the most dogmatic, the people that actually have a degree in something, whether they're a dietitian or if this guy was a physical therapist. He's like, this is my lane. He actually said that in the comments, stay out of my lane. You don't know what you're talking about. And I thought, wow, that's how people get so insulated and siloed. They don't want to hear anything else. They believe they're right. They've been told what they know. They can cite a few studies, but I could cite 7 more for him that show the opposite of what he's showing. But he's like, you're a doctor. You're not qualified to talk about running. And I thought, man, I'm a human being. I can talk about whatever I want, and you guys, the audience, can decide whether I'm full of shit or not, but we are free to think about anything. This notion of staying in your lane is complete bullshit, in my opinion. So you and I will gleefully, happily, dance around the ashes of the trolls as we talk about things like toothpaste and dental health as non-dental professionals, Evan.
Absolutely. Man, I've been wearing barefoot shoes since probably, I don't know, when the Vibrams first came out. Those toe shoes, I hated them, but I knew they were good for me. It was so annoying to get the pinky in there, but I'd wear those toe shoes and I would run around and get strange looks. And then luckily my kids, they've not been in regular shoes at all. They only wear barefoot shoes. So luckily my kids, as you mentioned, they're automatically going straight to the way they should.
You see it.
I do see it. Yes.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. They land on the ball of the foot. They're not heel striking at all.
It's totally true. I mean, it makes so much more sense. And if anyone's, I mean, who knew that we were going to talk about this in this podcast, but if anyone's tried this, you can run on concrete in bare feet with a 4-foot strike. Try doing that with a heel strike and see what happens. And then magnify that, or, extend that. Even if you're running on trails and you think dirt is softer than concrete, or you put a cushy heel, in your Nike Airs, like that's going to fool your body into thinking you're running on something super soft, but you're still like massively transferring the force from your ankle to your knee, to your hip, to your back. It doesn't make any sense. And yet you don't need to be a freaking physical therapist to figure this out. You just need to be a goddamn human.
Agreed.
Who,
Man, I tried going barefoot though when I lived in Austin. Oh my God. Those little thorny balls. I ended up with thorny balls on my feet all the time. So I was like,
the goat heads. Okay, they're brutal.
They
so you need to wear like a pair of sandals or a zero drop shoe or something. But
luckily,
the overarching point here, the overarching point here is that you said it well, that this ancestral perspective is quite valuable. And when we think about where we've come from as humans, that can inform us. I mean, it's a little bit, we have to be a little careful philosophically to adopt too much of that without careful consideration. But I think in my life, in my view, there's so much wisdom in where we've come from, whether it's food, human interaction, sunlight, sleep, relationships, running form, the way we interact with the natural world. Like there's so much information about where we've come from. This is why the ancestral perspective is so valuable. And we're losing so much of it so quickly that these type of things make so much sense. Like, hey, the Hadza don't wear high-heeled shoes. They have these flat sandals that are made out of tires, man. And when they run on their 4 feet because they figured this out, or they walk barefoot a lot of times too. So it makes so much sense for humans. We can learn so much about what we might do today to live well by just thinking about these sort of ancestral ideas. But people forget about these because they get stuck in offices and concrete jungles.
Well, you have a endless stream of content though. I'm waiting for the episode where you have on like some really thick-heeled Nikes and you're like, yeah, guys, check out my new shoes for the beach. These are designed for, off-trail running or something. I'm waiting for you to do the video there. So,
well, I'll call them bullshit and then I'll just like throw them in the ocean. I'll make good content. The only thing this Nike Air is good for is scooping dog shit off the beach. I can just like, hey, I've got this shoe that I'm going to take the shoe off and here's some dog poop. I'm just going to scoop the dog poop in the shoe and then I'm going to throw them both in the trash can. Get out of it's actually a good idea. I could do that.
I think it'd be worth it. I had a foot doctor on the podcast years ago. So I guess he was, quote, good enough or qualified enough to discuss this, but we ended up discussing the whole barefoot thing and how he's seen so many increase in foot injuries and women do this to their calf muscles and then that affects the low back. So then they have chronic back pain. So then they go to the doctor and they get back surgery. But they never would have ended up on the operating table getting back surgery if they simply wore proper footwear, which is barefoot shoes. If they had to wear shoes or no shoes, they would have saved themselves some back surgery. So the back surgeons are getting paid because of the shoe industry who's putting elevated heels, which is screwing up everything. So it's amazing just how far we've gone. So I know we've ranted on so many fun things, but we should talk about the fruit vegetable piece because I think this is what people they're misled on. And you still go into Whole Foods and you'll see the woman, she's got her pretty blonde hair and her ponytail and she's got her Lululemon pants on and whatever like fancy footwear and her Louis Vuitton purse. And she's just looking at all the apples and she's like, look at this beautiful apple. And it's either conventional, which should be labeled chemical. I will not rest on this topic until it freaking says what it really is, which is chemical. Like, conventional strawberries, $2.99 a pound. Organic strawberries, $4.99. It's like, stop calling it conventional. It's chemical. Okay. So anyway, she picks up the apple because she heard if she eats an apple a day, it keeps the doctor away. So then she takes the apple home. And the reality is, within the last 100 years, they've only been able to track this since like the 1920s, maybe the 1940s. But essentially, depending on what paper you look at, you've lost 25 up to 80% of all vitamin and mineral content. This is among apples, this is broccoli, this is carrots, this is potatoes, this is onions, this is every, quote, produce out there. It's like a minimum 20% nutrient loss. And we could pull up these tables if you think we should, but the long story short is, even in the last 100 years, if you were a vegetarian plant-based hippie in the 70s versus a plant-based hippie in the 2020s, you are getting 50% less on average nutrition than you got in the 70s. That's frightening.
It's an interesting concept. This guy, Sadhguru, was on Rogan's podcast recently and was talking about this as well.
I saw
this
him,
notion
yeah.
of this notion of soil. Man, I've tried to talk about soil a lot on my podcast, and it's one of the hardest things to get people excited about. It's hard to put soil in a bikini or lather it up in baby oil and make it look super sexy. Like, I can't get people excited about soil and dirt for the life of me. But I think it's a critically important concept that, and I love your title. I think it's brilliant. Like, this is a really dangerous time to be a vegan or vegetarian. I think that even before we talk about the loss of nutrients in these foods because of the depletion of the soil, let's also talk about the fact that many of these nutrients are less bioavailable at baseline. So, for instance, if you're eating like almonds, thinking that you're going to get magnesium, that magnesium is very poorly bioavailable in the almonds because of phytic acid and oxalates. So other minerals in things like grains or beans, whether it's oats, whether it's wheat, like these, especially all the seeds, it's very poorly bioavailable because of these big molecules that chelate it. But even with that in mind, so we start from a place where it's hard to get minerals from seeds being seeds, nuts, grains, and beans. Maybe you can get some minerals from a plant leaf. Your listeners will know, and my listeners will always know that, leaves are not something I'm a huge fan of because of all the other attendant problems that they have. In an absolute survival situation, maybe you can get a few minerals or vitamins and a few paltry calories from a leaf, along with the digestive enzyme inhibitors, which are also going to inhibit your ability to metabolize and absorb the nutrients from these leaves. So at baseline, they're very poorly nutrient available foods. And then take that in conjunction with the fact that we've been farming in an abysmal way. I mean, most farming is abysmal in and of itself for thousands of generations now, or at least hundreds of generations. I think thousands would be an accurate estimate if we're saying that farming began 10 to 15,000 years ago. So it's really pretty scary when you think about the way that the soil works. The best thing I could say to make soil interesting to people is it's teeming with life. It has a microbiome. The soil is alive. And when you're growing a crop in there and you're monocropping on a soil, you're pulling nutrients out. And if you don't put them back in with an animal input, which is absolutely required, you're going to get less and less nutrient-rich foods. And so you can either use an organic input like an animal, which is the way it's happened evolutionarily, because animals and plants always coexisted. Animals pooped and peed on the ground, and there's forests and jungles, and nobody was actually farming. And even if there was farming, animals would come and poop and pee in the farm, maybe, or not. But if you don't do that, you have to use synthetic fertilizers to put inputs back in, but that's never as good. We always know that. And so the soil becomes less and less nutrient rich. And then you have a real problem here, because those foods are very, very poor. They're poor at baseline, and then they're even more depleted because of the way we've been farming for so long.
Man, that's an incredible point. So I'll just going to restate it for people. Like, you're already coming in as spinach and kale and almonds and freaking tomatoes being not the best for you. Now, the not the best things for you to begin with, we didn't even get into the oxalates and the lectins and the things that disturb the gut barrier and the nightshades that can irritate your joints and that kind of thing. We didn't even get into that part. So add all that on there, and then now you take it and you make it 50 to 80% less nutritious than it was 50 to 100 years ago. You've got a recipe for disaster. And when you look at the side effects of all these nutrient deficiencies, now you get into the anxiety, you get into depression, you get into chronic fatigue, because now you just don't have enough nutrients. You're not getting enough CoQ10 like you're going to get from, what would you say the richest source is in the animal-based world of CoQ10? Would it be heart? Or
heart?
Okay. Makes sense, right? CoQ10 is good for the heart. How interesting that it's in the heart.
Yeah. Heart. Yeah.
Okay, so you take the most bioavailable nutrient you could get from a veggie, and you cannot even compare it to the organ, which is the heart, in terms of the nutrient density. And so
I don't even know if coenzyme Q10 occurs in the plant kingdom, Evan. Does it?
I don't even know. There's probably some plant-based form. Let's see.
I doubt it. I don't even think you can get that's one of those nutrients that only occurs in animal foods. This is the very interesting inequality between plant and animal foods, that there are so many nutrients that occur only in any appreciable quantity in animal foods. And coenzyme Q10 is a big one. Also creatine, carnitine, choline, anserine, taurine, the list goes on and on.
Oh, you're going to love this. Here was a paper on this right here. It was just a PubMed paper, coenzyme Q10 production in plants. Some of your favorite sources: soybean, peanuts, corn, and olive. So they're making vegan CoQ10 now.
Okay. I'd love to see like how much is actually in there, because I don't think it's anything near what you're going to get in animal food. And I'm going to bet it's either a different form, because there are B12 analogs in plant foods that don't actually work like B12 or could block B12 function in the human body. And then there are also other forms of many nutrients in plants which are not very bioavailable.
Precisely. Yeah, I don't even know if this goes into that in terms of, let's see, I'll do a Control F for soybean. Yeah, so it goes into the concentration here. This is actually pretty cool. I'm glad we're getting a little geeky now. So CoQ10 in terms of nutrient levels, it's showing, all right, so where's the heart? You know what I mean? Okay, here we go. We actually have heart on here. So they're saying milligrams per kilogram. Heart is smoking it. And then, of course, liver is really high up there too, which is awesome. Even muscle is surprising. I mean, I knew liver and heart are great, but I'm surprised even muscle's still on the list here. And then you compare it. Now they're saying that in soybean, they're saying 54 milligrams per kilogram, all the way up to 280. They're showing that it would beat heart. That sounds crazy.
If you ate a kilogram of soybeans.
How much is a kilogram? I mean, that's got to be
2.2 pounds.
Isn't it 2.2?
Yeah, 2.2 pounds. So, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to eat that many soybeans. And then you have all the other problems with soybeans, like the phytic acid. And
this is not even this is not even fair without a visual depiction. Like, show me how much liver I'd have to eat versus how much freaking soybean I'd have to eat. Like, I need a visual.
I mean, there's a couple here. Nobody's going to eat grape seeds. Nobody's going to eat that many olives. So there's essentially zero sources of any appreciable amounts of coenzyme Q10. Oh, these are oils, actually. These are plant oils, Evan. Do you see that? It says oils.
Where? Oh, right here.
Plant oil. That's soybean oil. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So you'd have to have a kilogram of soybean oil, which you and I both know what would happen if you had a kilogram of soybean oil.
Oh, what do you think would happen? I think I would have diarrhea for starters.
You'd have diarrhea, but this is one of the seed oils that I'm not a fan of at all, right? Soybean oil is very high in linoleic acid, which is going to be a major problem. All of these linoleic acid molecules are going to get incorporated into your cell membranes, into the mitochondrial membranes, into cardiolipin in the mitochondrial membrane. And that's going to be a big problem. So this, I think, is at the root of many of the issues that people find with mitochondrial dysfunction long-term, diabetes, insulin resistance. Basically, the problems with breaking fat cells, I think, have to do with excess linoleic acid. So this is not even soybeans. This is soybean oil.
My God.
So they're saying you can, because coenzyme Q10 is fat soluble. So you'd have to eat all of these oils. Yeah. It's not, this chart is not easy to read, but it says oils, and it says nuts here, and the nuts are very low. There's essentially none. But soybean oil is, of course, concentrated from soybeans. So you'd have to have a kilogram of soybean oil. I'd rather have, a kilogram or half a kilogram of heart.
Oh my God. Could you imagine a kilogram of peanuts? Here, let me eat 2 pounds of peanuts to get a whopping 27 CoQ. And that's just the concentration. That doesn't even, this is not even talking about what's actually bioavailable to the body, meaning if your stomach acid could possibly try to break down, what is that, a pound's worth of peanuts, how much would you actually even get from that? What's actually going to get absorbed? So this is not even accurate, because this is just saying the raw concentration. This is not even talking about what could the body even make out of all this garbage.
Yeah. And that's an important point that I doubt they're going to address in this paper. Maybe we would have to go down the rabbit hole further, but I bet that somebody somewhere has looked at this. And if not, my suspicion would be that plant coenzyme Q10 is much less bioavailable than animal coenzyme Q10. I'm also interested in this chart here in the upper left-hand corner that you point out. It just shows how coenzyme Q10 levels decline as you age. There's this paradigm that I think is often repeated and impoorly understood or improperly elaborated for humans, that these sorts of declines happen inevitably for humans as we age. But I think that so much of these age-related declines in nutrients like coenzyme Q10 have to do with the way that we live. And I bet that if you and I had our coenzyme Q10 levels checked, they wouldn't be declining. So I'm 44 years old. I would be this 40-year-old person on the graph. And they say that a 40-year-old person is going to have
Let me
It's a
zoom
little
in.
bit tricky to see here what they're saying. They're doing it by organ. I think that in the lungs, in the liver, they're saying that in my heart as a 44-year-old, I have 68% of the coenzyme Q10 I had when I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
I would be willing to bet, I would put money on this, that my coenzyme Q10 in my heart is just as good as it was when I was 20 right now. The same in my kidneys, my lungs, or my liver because of all the meat that I eat. And when you do these tests, like there were a couple of labs that I'd used. True Health Diagnostics went out of business, but you could actually look at coenzyme Q10 levels in the blood. And on all the people I worked with who were animal-based, who are eating 1 to 1.1 or 1.2 grams of protein from meat and organs per pound of body weight, their coenzyme Q10 levels were way off the chart. They were, the upper limit for coenzyme Q10, I think, was 0.7 or 1.1, probably for 2 standard deviations above the mean. And I'd see people in 2 and 3. So probably, we're talking 3 standard deviations, 4 standard deviations above the mean for coenzyme Q10 when they eat this way. But physicians don't do that test. I always harp on this in my podcast. I want to get people to get fasting insulin, but I think it would actually be really cool, now that I'm thinking about it with you, to get coenzyme Q10 levels on people in the blood. And I think that would be a good indication of chronic disease as well.
I don't know how it correlates to the blood, like the levels, but you can test CoQ10 on an organic acids test. So when we run your oat, we'll see your CoQ10. We'll see all your B vitamins too. I'm pumped.
Oh yeah, I'm going to do that when I get back to Austin. We'll talk about all the labs. And that's a urinary CoQ10 then, huh?
Yeah, I'm going to look.
Blood?
I'm going to. It is urinary. I'm going to pull it up right now and see. I'm going to pull up an example one, and let's just see, because I can't think of her name right now, but I had a client of mine who went to your gathering, and I've got a note test on her. I can't think of her name, and then I'd want to block out her name and stuff for privacy. I can't think of her, but I need to look back at her CoQ10 because she's going all in on animals and hearts, and so I wonder what her CoQ10 was. But
I bet it's high.
Yeah.
I bet it's high. See if you can find it, pull it up, and block her name out, because I definitely have my labs and could show my coenzyme Q10 levels. But I mean, there's so many of these nutrients, and so I think that it argues like, trying to get your nutrition from plants is a bad idea. If you know where your plants are grown and they're in really, really good soil, maybe that's better. But these plants are going to have defense chemicals in them at baseline. And I think of plants, especially vegetables, leaves, stems, roots, and seeds, as primarily survival food rather than food for thriving humans. I joke kind of tongue in cheek on Twitter and stuff and say, why would you eat the food of peasants when you can eat the food of kings? The food of kings is meat and organs and fruit. And the food of peasants, unfortunately, throughout human history has been the less nutrient-rich foods, the grains and the beans and the vegetables, which are left to peasants. And people might respond to that and say, well, kings were the one that got the chronic diseases historically. And I would say, yes, because kings were the ones drinking alcohol that was sweetened with sugar and, abusing those things as well. So I don't think kings were getting illnesses, or royalty was getting illness or chronic disease because of fruit or because of their food choices for meat and organs. But what they were drinking, and this has been talked about many times, Rick Johnson has talked about that, and there are papers actually showing that the gout historically in the English monarchies was most likely related to the fact that they sweetened their alcohol with excess sugars, not the fact that they were eating fruit.
of course. Well, and look what they did with the lead, right? I mean, they were drinking out of lead. I'd read about that with the downfall of the Romans. And also, did you see what they did to their feet? I can't remember which culture it was, if it was Europeans or what, but there were these tiny little shoes, and it was like this sign of royalty if you could put your foot in here. And these women would literally end up molding their feet to be like the size of like a cat paw to fit into this shoe, but only the royalty could wear these tiny little shoes. I'll have to look it up, but we need like a Jamie from like Rogan's podcast. We need.
I know, Jamie, look it up.
Yeah,
where's our Jamie?
Oh, no.
But I mean, it harkens back to what we were talking about with shoes and mainstream shoes earlier in the podcast with running form. I see mainstream shoes as similar to foot binding historically in geisha culture, in Asia, et cetera. I think it's the same sort of thing. We're binding our feet with these tight shoes. And when I was in medical school and residency and doing rotations, I had to wear fancy dress shoes as well. And I did my best to get like the fanciest dress shoes that were minimalist dress shoes. But there's been many times that I've worn fancy dress shoes and they're too compressed in my feet. They're not letting my feet expand. I mean, my feet are super wide. I think I've talked about this on the podcast, but I'm just thinking of it randomly now. When I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail in the year 2000, I hiked 2,700 miles from Mexico to Canada, and my feet got huge, dude. I'm like a size
Really?
10 and a half. Yeah, I have a size 10 and a half foot now, maybe 11. And at the end of the Pacific Crest Trail, I was wearing size 13 shoes. I couldn't fit in. Like, that's what happens to the human foot when you walk 10 hours a day. So like your bones and your foot spread out. And I never wear shoes right now. So maybe I'm an 11 now because my feet are expanding. But I only wear sort of minimalist wide toe box shoes now when I have to wear shoes. But at the end of Pacific Crest Trail, my shoes were size 13.
Oh my God. Well, the same thing for me. I was a 10 and a half normally, and then I started switched to barefoot shoes, and now I'm an 11. And I can't go back to a 10 and a half. My foot is like permanently like wider, and it's flatter too.
Yeah. All the bones in your foot will spread out, and your foot gets stronger. I think all the bones spread out, and the little muscles get worked more when you're doing the barefoot stuff.
Here's the shoe. So it says, by the end of the 15th century, it talks about there was actually laws that restricted the type of clothing a person could wear, and you couldn't mimic the elite class. So restrictions were placed on the length of a shoe's toe, limiting the length according to your income and position in society. And so by the end of the 15th century, the pointy shoe, it said it eventually gave way. This is I don't know if this is considered the bear paw that they're talking about, but that the width was also limited according to the wearer's status in society. So literally, they'd make you have a shorter foot and a more narrow foot. Now the question is, was it the wealthy that had the smaller one, or did the peasant class, did they get...
I bet the wealthy had the smaller ones with like the longer toes.
Yeah, here it is. Restricted to the elite. It was the fancy styles and the pointed toes.
Yeah.
So like it was good to not be the elite because maybe you didn't have to freaking mold your foot. Can you believe? I mean, look at that.
That's crazy. It looks horrible. And I mean,
and
even
clogs,
today,
it was talking about clogs in here too, and how, look how terrible that is. And it's popular footwear for healthcare professionals who appreciate the easy slip-on style. It's like, look, I think that these and Crocs, I think they're a disaster because it makes you lazy. You don't even have to bend over. You just slip your shoe on. Like, I want to bend over to put my shoe on. If I'm going to put a shoe on, I want to do the labor.
Well, the clogs are tough because that's not going to bend much, and the heel is so high. There's a lot of, even on the forefoot, there's a lot of height, but the heel is so high. I mean, the heel toe drop there is huge, and that then shortens the Achilles, and it causes all sorts of problems. Look at us being outside of the box. You're talking about shoes, but yeah, man, I agree. It's problematic for humans. You said something earlier that I wanted to touch on before we lost it. I think we'll have to double back to this. Then we can come back to the nutrients in the soil. But I was thinking about cholecystectomies, and I was thinking about gallbladder removal surgeries and how many gallbladder removal surgeries happen today. Because you were talking about back surgeries, shoes and back surgeries that are unneeded probably. But how many cholecystectomies, how many gallbladder removals happen that don't need to happen today? Because I really think that most gallstones, cholelithiasis, is choline deficiency. And again, we're back to the same nutrients that are found in animal foods and animal fats that create healthy teeth, that mean you don't need to use toothpaste with microplastics or fluoride. And the same nutrients like choline allow your body to make proper bile. So bile is made from cholesterol, bile salts, and a few other components. And if you don't put enough bile salts in the bile, then you get bile stones. So there's an imbalance between the bile salts and the cholesterol. That's generally what makes cholesterol stones form in a gallbladder, and those are the most common stones. Well, it's quite interesting that the formation of bile, so the bile for the bile acids to collect in the gallbladder, you have to move them from the liver, from the canaliculi, from the hepatocytes into the canaliculi, and they collect in the liver, and then they move to the gallbladder, and that process is choline dependent. So if you don't have enough choline, I think that most gallstones are the result of that. So how many people could avoid cholelithiasis by just getting enough animal foods? How many people are choline deficient? Here's another reason that being a vegan or vegetarian is very dangerous in 2022, because, hey, look, you're going to be choline deficient, then you're going to get gallstones, and that's a problem. Then you're going to lose your gallbladder for no reason when you could just have eaten animal foods.
Well, I looked it up. It says an estimated 700,000 of these surgeries per year, 700,000. Now, here's the point, too, to take it a step further, and that's an amazing education piece on that choline dominant pathway. of the liver, making the bile, concentrating it, storing it in the gallbladder. But here's the thing too, once the gallbladder is gone, you ain't getting it back. And now when you go to animal-based, meat-based, or adding all this stuff in, now you're at a disadvantage because now you don't have any storage. Now you'll still make some bile from the liver, right? But you're missing out on that roughly, what, 10x, I've read, 10x concentration. So like it's a big deal. My mother-in-law, she didn't listen to me for years. I'm like, okay, we need to do this to help your gallbladder. We got to get these foods in, try these enzymes temporarily. You've got tons of gut dysbiosis. Let's work on this. She doesn't listen. Guess what happens? She has a gallbladder attack, goes to the emergency room. Evan, they want me to take out my gallbladder. I'm like, it's just an attack. It's not going to kill you. They did the HIDA scan. There's no like active blockage. It's just a stone. Let's just get you back home. Let's work through this. No, I'm going to go ahead and let him take it out. Now she has massive digestive problems, as you and I think we discussed this either on your show or maybe last time you came on mine. Now it's the issue of you don't have that antimicrobial because the bile is incredible antimicrobial. So now the gut dysbiosis goes crazy too because now you don't have that bile that naturally would have neutralized any pathogens from the food. So now like your stomach is not going to be optimally digesting or breaking down or possibly killing pathogens that you're consuming. So now you've opened up a whole other can of worms.
We need these organs, man. People are taking out their gallbladders like it's nothing. And it's a problem. I mean, the appendix is another interesting rabbit hole. All of the potential lymphoid tissue, these Peyer's patches throughout the small intestine, but also potentially in this region of the colon that could lead to, you know, immune effects. And then you take out the appendix and is it really vestigial? I don't know. We lose it, but why do we lose the appendix so much? Let's look up how many appendectomies happen a year. So we found that there's 700,000 cholecystectomies, but I'm curious how many appendectomies. I thankfully have both my gallbladder and my appendix, but a lot of people lose them.
Me too. So Google says approximately 280,000 appendix removals per year.
Okay. So gallbladders are even more. That's interesting. But
and as you know, in the very similar aspect, this is usually an emergency surgery. So like people just they're so afraid, they have this attack, and doctor's like, you got to do it, or it's already ruptured. You know, so that is not. In
that case, you pretty much have to do it. I mean, and to be fair, like let's just be very clear here that cholecystitis can be life-threatening. The gallbladder can get massively inflamed. Cholelithiasis and cholecystitis are different things. Cholecystitis is when the gallbladder is actually inflamed and there's an infection there and bacterial involvement. And like appendicitis is the same thing. So I think a lot of appendectomies do have to happen acutely, but the question is how much of both of these could be prevented with differences in the diet. And I do wonder how much of our diet has a role in appendicitis. And when I remember being in medical school, and it's probably 2 a.m, Evan, and we're doing another appendectomy, and I'm a medical student and I want a good grade in this rotation. So I have to be chipper and super excited to take out this guy's appendix, or at least watch the surgeon take out this guy's appendix while I hold retractors at 2 a.m. And he goes, why did this happen tonight? Why tonight of all nights did this guy's appendix decide to become inflamed and do all these things? And the answer you're supposed to give is fecalates. There's just a piece of poop, a poop rock. A fecalith got stuck in there. It's the most unsatisfying explanation ever. You're telling me that randomly this human's poop became a rock and got stuck in their appendix? There's something else going on there, some sort of dysbiosis or something weird, to inflame the aperture of the appendix, or something got swollen there because of something immunologic going on in the gut. I have no doubt that appendicitis is related to diet as well.
Oh, well, I had one guy actually who went to the emergency room. He was diagnosed with appendicitis, but they didn't want to remove it for some reason. They said, no, we don't think you're in immediate danger somehow. So they sent him home despite being diagnosed with appendicitis. So all I did was give him my best educated guess. I thought, okay, well, you look at the colon, you look at the ileocecal valve. I thought, maybe this is related to gut bacteria. Maybe this is like a dysbiosis situation. So I just dosed him with extremely high dose probiotics, and he recovered very quickly, and he never had an issue again. So I don't know. Like, some argue the appendix is like this storage facility for beneficial microbes, and that if the intestines get too messed up, the appendix goes, oh, hey, here's some beneficial microbes I've been storing for you. So that's kind of why I came in with the probiotic vein, and it helped him. So I don't know.
What do you What do you think about probiotics in general, Evan? Do you find them to be useful in your practice?
I think they're useful, but you shouldn't need them. But here's the
Uh-huh.
reality. My bias is to say you may need to use them. Number one, just because there's some cool new studies coming out on specifically the lactobacillus, and the lactobacillus is converting mycotoxins like ochratoxin into a less toxic form, and then it's allowing the body to process it more easily. But the reason I think that more people need them is because almost everybody on a stool test has low lactobacillus, and guess what kills lactobacillus is glyphosate, and everybody's eating trace amounts of glyphosate. So I think in the hunter-gatherer world, the mindset, no, I think that because you have dirty hands, you're eating dirt, you're eating food that has dirt, you're eating animals that have dirt, you're walking in the dirt, you're getting exposed to all the microbes. But I think now everybody's freaking spraying hand sanitizer still. They're completely in a sterilized environment. They've done tons of antibiotics. They've had tons of pesticide exposure. We don't have enough beneficial microbes to balance out what's happening. Now, is it possible that you can just completely heal it doing diet? Can you just do an animal-based diet and recover and balance out your microbes? I don't know. I see a ton of people that are doing carnivore and all their lactobacillus is still so damn low. And so I do temporarily spot treat with it. I will throw it in for a month or two, but I don't think you should need it long term. I think if you need it ongoing, what are you doing wrong? What are you doing to damage your gut? So I use it as a boost, just like I do with amino acids. So if I see somebody super depressed and anxious and I see low dopamine on the O, I may go, okay, here's some tyrosine and here's some 5-HTP for a month or two, but then I pull it out and see if it sticks. And if they keep their gains, I'm like, okay, great. So I do the same thing with probiotics.
It'll be interesting. I haven't done a stool test on myself in a while. We're going to do one that we'll review on this podcast in the future when I get back to Austin. So I will be collecting my poop, but I'd be surprised. I would be interested to look at my lactobacillus because I've recently added back fermented dairy to my diet and found it to be a very positive thing. I think that humans need calcium in the diet, either from bone meal or some source. There's a lot of benefits to calcium. And for me, it was fermented goat's milk, fermented raw goat's milk. It's been a good source of that. I found a guy here in Costa Rica that does raw goat's milk. So it's a godsend. So I'm interested to see if that's a good thing. And you said glyphosate, which made me think about another thing that I was kind of rabbit holing about recently. At the gathering, somebody brought up this interesting point that there is some research on glyphosate in honey, which makes a lot of sense. I'm a big fan of honey. And it kind of speaks to this concept of the terrain, just like we did with vegetables and the soil depletion of nutrients is going to affect the quality of the nutrition in your plant foods and probably the quality of the nutrition in the animals that are eating the grass on those same soils. But in this case, when we're talking about honeys, it's pretty crazy because I know that there are some honeys, and people at the animal-based gathering that we had told me there's some honey that says glyphosate free on it. But I think that I'm eating 3 or 4 tablespoons of honey per day now, in addition to fruit. And I think I'm probably getting 200 plus grams of carbohydrates a day because the fruit in Costa Rica is freaking amazing. And as you can tell in my videos, I'm getting really fat from all this fruit. And I'll add something else about the fruit in a moment. But I do think it's interesting if you're eating honey to know where the honey comes from and to look for organic honey, or at least do your due diligence, just like you would with water. And we can talk about water too. Do your due diligence with your honey and know what the farms are around there. Because even if your honey is good and it's raw, they're not using glyphosate near the bees. But if the bees are going 3 or 4 miles away, then they could go to a field that's, a bunch of glyphosate sprayed stuff. And then there's going to be glyphosate back in the honey.
I don't use any honey in terms of local honey. I use organic honey, but it comes from Brazil. And I'm assuming it's probably in the middle of the rainforest somewhere. So that is the organic honey that I use. But, years ago, I was at the farmer's market and I saw this local honey. And, I'm in Kentucky and there's a lot of corn and soybean here. And so I would ask them, oh, where do you live? And then they'll tell me a part of town. And I know that's Farmville, where it's corn, it's soybean, it's sprayed like hell. And so I just had I had a bad gut feeling about it, to be honest. Even before I looked into the research on it, I had a bad gut feeling about local honey. The idea of local honey, it's like, okay, well, you get the local allergens, the local pollen. So they act like it's a small immune booster. But I could care less about that because I would rather boost my immune system in other ways and get a clean honey. So for people listening on audio, this is just one thing here. There was a Canadian honey sample study. 98% of the honey samples it says here this is a pretty good sample size here. 200 samples of honey they examined. 197 of the 200 had glyphosate residue. Also, the Manuka honey in New Zealand, the super expensive stuff. You and I talked about that last time. There was a paper here about that glyphosate in New Zealand Manuka honey as well. And then guess what? Glyphosate, just like it does in humans, this is why I use probiotics. So I know you've talked about probiotics. You're like, oh, maybe not a huge fan of them. But I think that our guts are so friggin' screwed by the trace amounts of exposure. Even in the water supply, you're getting glyphosate. So I still think there is a role for probiotics as a treatment. But as you talk about with herbs, as a medicine, not a staple. And so that's kind of how I use them. But the point is, in the bees, they're saying the same thing here, that the glyphosate is disturbing the gut microbiome of the bees. And they're saying here, guess what, that this is a possible role of the colony decline. Bees, before humans were doing everything we're doing, we weren't having the collapse. I mean, I don't know how much you've looked into this, but the colony collapse disorder, on average, 50 to 70% of hives, depending on what part of the country, are gone every year. You're just going to lose half of your hive every year. And they're trying to come up with all these new chemicals and fungicides that you put into the bees and spray this on them and give them sugar water and do this for them. But it's like, what's this doing? It's got to be something.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking in the back of my mind, like, you and I should build a company to make glyphosate-free honey. I think that's our next thing, man. I think we're gonna do this. Like,
I think the profit margin will be so low on that. I mean, that's a lot of labor for those bees, and then you sell it for what, maybe like $8 a pound or so.
Oh no, it's you'd have to make it a little more than that, but who knows? I mean, I just know that when a product doesn't exist and it's something that you and I would like, we should build it for people just to make it more accessible. Because I'm thinking, we didn't want this podcast to be doom and gloom. We wanted to give solutions, and I want to give more solutions in this podcast. But I'm thinking, I know there are some honeys that are labeled glyphosate free, and I would go for those if you can. I'm going back to Austin. I'm going to have to figure out which honeys are glyphosate free in Austin, because I want to know. I don't know. Here in Costa Rica, I get my honey from a friend who has a farm, and it's way up in the Costa Rican hills. And I'm thinking, this is pretty darn good. This is not Farmville. I'm pretty sure that honey is pretty darn safe. And I know the guy who makes it. It's from a single source farm. But again, not many people can do this. So I think there's a market for a glyphosate-free honey. We'll talk offline about it, man. It would be interesting. We couldn't necessarily do it. We have to figure out where. It would be interesting, because then you would be growing bees in a part of the world that is fairly pristine. Costa Rica might have some spots, so there is agriculture here, and I'm sure they do use glyphosate in this country. We'd have to think, like, where's the cleanest place for bees to be? Because honey is delicious and super valuable for humans in many different ways, even for the gut microbiome. There's prebiotics and things in honey. But where can we get it where it's the cleanest? So know what's in your honey. Do a little bit of research there. The other thing that has come a couple of times is your water. So I wanted to talk about this because it's something I get asked about all the time. We mentioned fluoride in the water. I'll be curious what you're doing for water now, but I'm just going to a distiller, man. So I'm going to bring back a distiller to Costa Rica. I've got a distiller in Austin, and it's essentially kind of like reverse osmosis, but it's even the next step beyond reverse osmosis. So it's basically distilling the water into just H2O. I'll remineralize it and go from there. Then we'll see. I'll go down this rabbit hole. The cons of a distiller are that people would say it's too harsh on the body. It's too mineral depleted. The pros are that it's totally freaking clean. And even bottled water, I've done a podcast on what's in your water. Is there uranium in your water? Because if you look at a lot of these bougie bottled waters, Evan, have you heard that podcast? Like Pellegrino and even Gerolsteiner. A lot of the ones that I really liked had a lot of radioactive elements in the freaking water. Even like the bougie water at the grocery store has a lot of good things. Mountain Valley water is pretty clean from what I can tell. Fiji water is pretty clean, but it's in plastic, unfortunately. So I won't do that because I don't need any more xenoestrogens in my life. But I think that a reasonable solution for people for water might be to get a distiller and then remineralize. What are you thinking about this?
Man, I've heard about distilled water. I've had some clients that claim that it's like their detox miracle. They claim, man, I feel better on distilled water than I do on spring water, which I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. What's the deal there? So I don't know. I mean, my current system is a big activated charcoal block. It's like 4 or 5 feet tall. It's a whole house water filter with the carbon in there. So it's a carbon-based system. We have a pre-filter, and then we have a post-filter because we they add fluoride, and it's incredibly difficult, almost impossible, because the molecule of fluoride is so small.
It's hard to get it out.
Yeah, the carbon blocks won't take care of it. So we have a post filter after it goes through the carbon block for all the pesticide, herbicide. Then it goes into a bone char, actually is what it is, a bone char to grab onto the fluoride, and then we have a lead one after that. So it's a complicated system. So like if you flush the toilet while you're taking a shower, you're just getting a sprinkle because it slows down the flow rate so much. So I'm just like standing like Will Ferrell and Elf when he's in the little shower. It's kind of like that because you can't get enough water flow. But I can drink it and know that I'm not getting fluoride and pesticide and herbicide. And back to the bees for a second. So I think it's a great idea. You have to have a bubble, but not a huge bubble because of the like kind of like a deer. Like I've studied deer pretty extensively in general, unless it's the rut. Like a deer only goes like a square mile. So bees, as far as I can tell, it's only like a few square miles generally.
Let's look that up. Let's look up how far bees fly, because I think that'll help. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you can get just this bubble, it's going to be easier. So it says 3 to 6 miles. So field bees forage a range between 3 to 6 miles around the hive. They prefer to stay within 3 miles, but will go farther if a dearth calls for it. What do they mean, dearth?
If like a dearth of pollen or dearth of nectar, like if there's a lack. So yeah, if you could probably create pretty darn clean honey if you put bees in a 6 mile diameter, right?
Even two maybe. Yeah.
They say here, radius though. It's 3 mile radius.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Around the hive. So yeah, radius. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you'd have to use 6 mile, like a 12 mile diameter. Yeah.
I mean, it's big, but it's not impossible. It's not
impossible. No, not impossible. But you'd have to know, you'd have to be very intentional and say, hey, we're producing glyphosate-free honey. There's no glyphosate being sprayed within 6 miles of this hive or radius, and we tested it.
Now, just for the trolls listening, because I like how you kind of made a troll comment, so I'm going to make a troll comment too, because I've had this comment before on some of the things I published about glyphosate. People say, oh, it's everywhere, not a big deal. You know, you can't avoid it. Quit living in a bubble. You're bubble boy. You're hiding from reality. You need to just like adapt to the world or something. Here's the deal, guys. Parts per billion, ppb, has been shown to disrupt the microbiome. Parts per billion is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of exposure to glyphosate. I've interviewed Stephanie Seneff on this. She's a PhD researcher. She's awesome. Dr. Mercola had her on his show. That's how I found her years ago. And she's written about this stuff for years. And she's like, look, the trace amounts are the problem. Because when you have a trace amount of that, plus dicamba, plus 2,4-D, plus this and that, it's the synergistic negative impact on the gut. It's not just glyphosate alone. It's when you have a little bit of that in the fire, plus a little bit of this, it's not 1 + 1 = 2 in toxicity. It's like 1 + 1 = 10. So, like, don't just think that, like, oh, that guy, Dr. Paul and Evan, they're just like anal. They just have too much time on their hands. They're just worried about everything. It's like, well, if you want to thrive, you've got to consider all of these variables that could be taking you down. Because if you go to eat that strawberry, not only is it possibly 50% less nutritious than it was 50 to 100 years ago, but that strawberry on average is containing 22 different pesticides. And you're screwing up your gut. So then you go have diarrhea. You go to your gastroenterologist. Your gastroenterologist may put you on a PPI or an antispasmodic medication for IBS, but they're not going to tell you to go eat organic strawberries and glyphosate-free honey. They're not going to bring that up. I promise.
They're not. And so I always frame it this way for people. If you're thriving, if you can honestly look at your life and say libido, mental clarity, body composition, emotional stability, kindness with other humans, sleep, mood. If you're thriving, if you're kicking ass in every way, if you're freaking Superman, Superwoman, then don't change a thing about your diet. Maybe glyphosate isn't a big thing for you. But if you want to optimize your life, then these things are important. These conversations are important, especially if you're suffering with an autoimmune disease, a GI illness, a mental health illness, which is what I talked about last week on my podcast. Like all of these things are so important. And you know, mainstream Western medicine doesn't have answers for you if you have these problems. This is your wake up call, listeners. Like if you have an autoimmune disease, if you have a mental health issue, if you have GI issues, no one is coming to save you. Because
Unfortunately.
Western medicine will not save you. They will just try and give you a pill. And this is not because the doctors are not intelligent or well-intentioned. It's because the medical system is not complete, because the paradigm is incomplete, because we've been taught pharmaceutical-based paradigms and that alone. And that is what doctors are taught to do. They feel like they are doing their job when they do that. So this is why Evan and I do this work. We think outside the box and think, maybe this is what's going on here. You don't have to take our advice, but hey, if here's a free piece of information that might just change your life. We were talking before the podcast, Evan, about a guy, this kind of pale, fluffy, which is a nice way of saying a little bit pudgy, British guy was trolling me on Instagram and saying, hey, look, here's this doctor. He called me a bellend, which is an English term for like an annoying human. He was saying, here's this guy, and he's telling you that kale is bullshit, and he's doing it under the guise of being a doctor. But listen, he said, even if that were true, life is about living. It's about enjoying. It's about having fun. You're all going to die, man. You can get all the nutrients in the world from your raw liver and testicles, but you're still going to die, which sounds like a reasonable point at first, until you realize that the majority of people listening to him and listening to this podcast are suffering in some way. And you're not going to get better if you always do what you've always done. The reason we do this work is not for people that are thriving. It's for people that are suffering. And so we're not telling people to avoid living their lives or to avoid living well or enjoying their lives. What we are trying to do is give people back a fullness of life by thinking intentionally about inputs in their life that may be causing them harm. So it's completely reverse. It just makes me so frustrated that this guy, gathers people's attention, but he's totally missing the point. So rant done.
No, I love the rant, and I would love to continue the rant. Speaking of kale, since we didn't get into this, and this has been more conversational than super geeky, I don't want to bore people with the numbers, but since you brought up kale, let's go ahead and hit kale. This is from the publication here. It was titled America's Vanishing Nutrients, Decline in Fruit and Vegetable Quality Pose Serious Health and Environmental Risk. And you guys can look through this. This is an insane amount of data. This is actually taken directly from the USDA and their food composition table. So when you just do Control F and search for kale, you can see like the calcium. And this is just in the last, I want to say this was 1970. And this actual, I think the latest number here we're looking at is 1991. So this is actually not even that okay, here it is. Here it is right here. It's 1975 compared to 97. Okay, so you realize this is only, 22 years of change? And so this is not, 1975 was still not a very good year in terms of nutrient density. We had already been intensively farming for potentially 100 years. And so I know my grandpa's grandpa was farming in the 1800s. The nutrient density was far higher back then. So keep in mind these numbers. This is a 22-year change. We're not even talking 1975 to 2022. So the numbers are probably far worse. But at least back then, just that change, kale dropped almost 25% in calcium. It dropped almost 23% in iron. And keep in mind, it's garbage, non-bioavailable iron, like what you get from meat.
And garbage, non-bioavailable calcium. But yes, it's an indication of the soil quality going down.
Yep. Yeah. They said vitamin A, none. But then when you look at like daikon, they're saying 0, or daikan. I don't even know. That's like a green, isn't it? Some sort of
radish.
A radish. Okay. Who cares about radishes?
Why do you want to eat a root? It's bullshit.
Yeah, it is. Carrots. Well, they're saying carrots are up. So interesting.
Who knows?
I'm still not eating carrots unless it's like fun, and that's not really fun. And then they go to the vitamin C levels. Basically, well, they're saying kale was down 4%. You've got mustard greens down 27, onions 36. You've got turnip greens 56% less. So anyway, across the board, long story short, it's insane, just the loss. And as you've eloquently illustrated hundreds of times, but I never get sick of hearing you say it, it's the quality of the nutrient like calcium that you began with was already terrible. So you're taking garbage, non-bioavailable form. It's potentially a raw green. You're sitting there at the salad bar. Would you believe there's a place in town now where you can drive through and get a chicken salad? It's called like Chicken Salad Chicks. And luckily, fortunately, there's never anyone there. If I drive past, there's never anyone in the parking lot. So that makes me a little happy.
Oh boy. I don't know where to go with all that. That's crazy. I mean, it's like Yeah, I don't think you should be eating kale or daikon in the first place. Let me talk about carrots. We'll riff on carrots for a second before we wrap this one up. People ask me about carrots all the time. I think they're bullshit because they're a root, because they have these compounds called furanocoumarins in them. They're in this family with celery, and all these celery family vegetables have furanocoumarins, which can accumulate in the skin and cause photosensitivity. It's a clear defense mechanism by these things. But I had carnivore Aurelius over to my dinner the other night. Over to my house for dinner the other night. Yes, I've seen him in person. No, I'm not going to tell you who he is or anybody listening to this podcast. He's a friend of mine. He's not me. You guys can see that on my Instagram stories or on his Instagram reel. But we have this debate, this ongoing debate about carrots, because he's a big fan of Ray Peat. And one of the things that Ray Peat, spelled P-E-A-T, and his acolytes are a fan of is this raw carrot salad. And so they take like coconut oil, which I'm not terribly stressed about. It's not high in linoleic acid at all. And they put coconut oil on raw carrots, and they claim that it helps absorb endotoxin. And I said, where's the data? Like, show me a freaking study. So if anybody listening to this knows anybody in the Ray Peat community and can show me any study that shows that raw carrots will absorb endotoxin or prevent absorption or transition or transportation of endotoxin across the gut lining, show me, because I'm not convinced. And I think that there's plenty of ways to get insoluble fiber in your diet. Even fruit has a little bit of insoluble fiber, which could absorb endotoxin. So I don't think carrots are magical in any way, shape, or form, guys. I'm sorry, but I think they're bullshit too. I just wanted to get that in there.
Please. I mean, well, if you're talking endotoxins, lipopolysaccharide, any of the garbage you want to use, you could just simply use a gentle binder. Like a lot of good quality charcoal is made from coconut shells. So you can get organic coconut shells. That binder is incredible. I mean, it's an adsorbent. So it's like a little magnet, essentially. Little toxins get stuck to it. That'd be far safer. I don't know, less risky than a carrot.
I mean, it's almost comical when you say it. I think some people were fine with carrots, right? And I think some people are thriving and they're not going to have a problem with carrots. But listen, if you're not thriving, this is why I'm thinking in this way. Like, you need to think that maybe carrots aren't great for your gut, or maybe carrots are giving you gas. And then there's this long-term conundrum that we run into. And I'm still struggling to express this to people, that we really will never know the answer for so many of these nutritional questions. We might, when you and I are both 90, and if you and I are both 90 and freaking ripped and kicking ass, we might be like, hey, I think we were right. But everybody that argued with us is now dead. So all of our detractors are now dead. Nobody cares anymore. And we're 90 years old. We've only got a few more years to surf and ski and do whatever the heck we're still doing at 90, hopefully, if we're right. If we're wrong, like, so many of these arguments, we'll never know the answer. But I do have this concern that long term, and this is just my philosophy, it's a hypothesis, it's a guess, but it's just the way that I see the world at this moment. It's always evolving, but I think that it's continually going in this direction, that I think that by avoiding these plant chemicals as we age, we will age better. And that stands in stark distinction to what other people like David Sinclair would say. But I think that the more of these plant defense chemicals we can avoid as we age, we will age better, because we will not accumulate the plant's defense chemicals. I do worry that accumulation of things like furanocoumarins from carrots over the long term could be harmful for humans. This is really based on first principles and thinking that carrot root is defended. It doesn't want to get eaten. So of course it's going to be a problem. And maybe we shouldn't eat more of that as we're aging. So of course, one carrot's not going to kill you. I'm sure people are laughing saying, carrot's going to kill you, right? And somebody will make a meme about this. But it's also the question, like, how do we know, or can we devise a study to test or really get a sense of, like, will a lifetime of carrots perhaps just predispose you to sun damage? Or will a lifetime of carrots and kale and beets predispose you to other problems? Because I did a podcast a few weeks ago on non-protein amino acids. I don't know if you've heard about these, Evan, but they're super interesting. These are, in the human body, there are 20 to 21 amino acids, depending how you characterize what we use to make proteins. And for people that don't know, you have DNA, which is transcribed into mRNA, and that mRNA is translated into proteins. In order to make the protein from the mRNA, you use these things called transfer RNAs, tRNAs. And the tRNAs connect a codon, a 3-base pair or a 3-base cluster on the mRNA, and they connect that with an amino acid. And so there's like this coding system where 3 bases on the mRNA codes for an amino acid. And what non-protein amino acids are, within the natural world, there are over 500 amino acids. And many of these occur in plants, and they're almost like prions from plants. People get worried about prions like mad cow disease, which was in the UK, and it was this prion in cow brains and neural tissue that did appear to cause problems for some people, probably because of the ways the cows were being raised. There was a mass slaughter in the UK. I don't think they've had any outbreaks recently. New Zealand has never had a case of mad cow disease ever. And I think there may have been a few cases in the US, but it's very tightly watched. So that's what a prion is. It's a protein that can cause misfolding of other proteins. Well, in a similar way, but not quite the same way, these non-protein amino acids in plants might be getting incorporated into our proteins and causing misfolding. There's a really compelling hypothesis by a gentleman named Rubenstein from Stanford. I believe he's dead now, but I want to go into it in more detail on a future podcast, suggesting that these non-protein amino acids may be yet another defense mechanism in plants, especially in their seeds, that cause misfolding in our proteins as humans. It's not the type of thing you're going to see acutely. I love it when vegetables cause people to have gas and bloating, because acutely they can be like, this broccoli is bad for me. But long-term, there's this potential. And this is what I worry about. This is kind of the hypothesis that I keep putting out there, that I need to think about how to test and how to communicate to people better. This idea that these non-protein amino acids could accumulate in our proteins and cause misfolding because this tRNA puts in a wrong amino acid, not one of the 21 that we actually use. Something like there's one called AZE, which is in sugar beets. And there's another one called canavanine in alfalfa sprouts. And if you get too many alfalfa sprouts, there's pretty good documentation in the medical literature of this lupus-like autoimmune syndrome. And so the overarching hypothesis here, and I'm totally rabbit holing and going off out to left field, but the overarching hypothesis here is that perhaps these non-protein amino acids in seeds could be a contributor to neurodegeneration in humans. That's the type of thing that I worry about long-term for us. And we won't really know how we're aging for 20, 30 years. So it's a very difficult position to take, but that's why I think it's important to think about these things. Does all that make sense?
It does make sense, and I'm glad that you summarized it at the end, because you're talking about misfolding, and I thought, oh my God, you're talking neurodegeneration then. And so I'm glad you threw that in there, because people think of misfolding. What the hell is he talking about? That is not good. I mean, that's like ALS, Alzheimer's, dementia, any of these neurodegenerative diseases that we're seeing. Some of them have an autoimmune component. I believe a lot of them we're going to find are autoimmune in nature at the end of the day. You know, you have some people saying it's heavy metals, some people saying it's chemicals, some people saying it's natural and genetic. I find more and more things being labeled autoimmune. So you could, I think you're onto something. I think this could be a trigger for more autoimmune disease. Why are people eating more green smoothies than ever before, but autoimmune disease is so rampant? There's actually a woman out there, I forget her name, but there's a doctor out there who she sells this lupus cure, and all it is green smoothies. So one of my clients who was animal-based took her daughter, who was not animal-based, took her daughter to this doctor for lupus, says she was going to cure her lupus. The prescription was literally, I'm not joking you, you're going to crap your pants. So it was 9 pounds of leafy greens per day, and it had to be juiced or blended into a smoothie. And guess what? It didn't work. The numbers went down a little bit. Some of her lupus markers, the ANA markers, some of the titers improved a little bit, followed by, surprise, a rapid flare. And I assume from all the lectins and garbage and everything irritating her gut. So she had this temporary thing, and the doctor's like, okay, this is great. You're going to cure your lupus. Keep doing this. 9 pounds a day. Literally plants, nothing else, not even coconut oil. Literally just plant leafy green matter.
Oh my God.
And now she is, the lupus butterfly rash it's spread. Her gut is a mess. She has chronic diarrhea. She's lost 25 pounds without trying. I mean, it's like, this is dangerous. But that's what you and I battle. We battle some of these ideas that kind of go viral, like a plant-based diet cured my cancer. So maybe we could do, I don't know, another future episode on this, but that's the problem we're battling. Is there are some influential people out there with 1 million+ followers that are saying that a green smoothie cured their cancer, but in reality, they had surgery to remove the cancer or some other intervention. So
let's talk about that. Let's talk about that real quickly, and we could do a whole episode on it in the future, because I do get that question a lot, which is, you know, what about vegans who are thriving? And I say, yeah, show me the vegan who is doing better on a vegan diet than an animal-based diet. Show me the human who would honestly say, and this would take a really special human who would be honest on both sides. Show me the human who would honestly say that they are doing better on green smoothies and salads and almonds than animal meat and organs and fruit and honey and raw dairy. Like, that just isn't going to exist for me. There was actually, the BBC did this really sneaky, annoying piece on YouTube where they took 2 twins and they had one twin go vegan. And they said, is a vegan diet better than eating meat? But what they didn't tell you very clearly in that video was that the twin who didn't go vegan, continued eating like a bunch of junk, right? So they have one twin that goes vegan. He cuts out the processed food for a few weeks, and they're athletes. They were training. But then the other twin, they were saying that he was a meat eater, which is true. But then he was eating like processed meat or other processed food and seed oils and other garbage. And so they didn't have This is actually really important now that I think about it. There's no health food diet in the mainstream that includes meat yet. That's what I wanted to create with an animal-based diet. I want them to do that experiment on the BBC with a guy going vegan and a guy going animal-based, quote unquote, which is meat, organs, fruit, honey, and raw dairy. Show me someone doing a healthy diet, which in both of our definitions is no processed sugar, no seed oils, with meat and organs. Show me someone where a vegan outperforms them. That is bullshit. I don't think that would ever happen. But the BBC tried to make it seem like, oh, a plant-based diet is healthier, when in fact, the twin that was eating meat was also eating all the junk food from before. So it was really sneaky the way they do this. And show me the vegan who has either eaten meat in the past without junk food and done better on a vegan diet than that. I don't think that exists. Show me the vegan who doesn't get better when they add meat back to their diet or organs back to their diet. This just doesn't happen. But it's so misleading. And so the corollary to this is the question I get all the time. What about these stories of people curing cancer with a vegan diet? And they're very rare. They're anecdotes. Number 3, Gerson therapy includes organs. So people don't know this, but this Gerson therapy that they do in Mexico, where they do a lot of plant juices, also includes raw liver or cooked liver. So there's liver on the Gerson diet as well.
Really?
And guess what? Yeah. If you look it up, it's not controversial. Like, they definitely include organs on a Gerson diet. And so sometimes it's not always what you put into your diet, it's what you take out of your diet. So when people go plant-based, it's sort of like fasting. If somebody's eating a bunch of junk food and they go on a vegan diet, yeah, they might feel better because they took out a bunch of junk food. But listen, that doesn't mean that the plant-based diet cured it. It just means that they didn't wait long enough to get the nutrient deficiencies and the nutritional collapse that comes with a vegan diet. So,
oh my God, I did not know that. I had always thought Gerson was just straight plants. Yeah, you're right. It's talking about that it's a crude liver extract in juice made by processing fresh calf and veal livers. There you go.
Yeah.
Holy crap. See, the whole time you hear Gerson, you think plant-based cancer remedy. Plant-based cancer.
Yeah.
That's what. Oh, and I forgot to mention, that's a great point about the guys. So the girl I told you, so the mother was animal-based, worked with me, fell for the plant-based thing for her daughter with lupus, right? But when I did the call with the mother 2 weeks before she went plant-based, oh, sorry, I'm in the car, Evan. I'm on my way to the kids' whatever party, and I just had to pick up a bunch of pizza. So the girl went from straight pizza diet to plant-based. Maybe that's why you saw it was the absence of the processed dairy, the gluten, the inflammatory foods, the histamine foods, and all the processed meats and whatever. Went on the plant-based, saw temporary reduction in the blood markers. The titers went down. Lupus looked like it was improving, and then she crashed. So it's like totally not fair. We should have went this girl animal-based. She went from pizza to plants. Like, my God. Now, if you want to do that, man, what you're describing, that little study, I'd pay for the test if you want to do this. You want to take a vegan, a vegan or animal-based person, you want to run them side by side. I will be the guy. I'll sponsor this study if you want to do it, and we'll run side by side. I'll put together a comprehensive testing plan that we can do, where we can look into mitochondrial function, brain chemistry, nutrient markers, B vitamins, vitamin C, glutathione status, CoQ10. We could put this together easily, and we could run the 30-day vegan, the 30-day or 60-day or whatever. Man, I'd pay for it right now. I'll pay for it out of pocket. Let's do it. Swipe my card.
That'd be take my money. That'd be great content. We should do it, dude. We just got to find the vegan. We got plenty of people to do animal-based.
Okay.
We'll find the vegan. We'll do it. That'd be a great content. You guys can all stay tuned for that.
Vegans listening, if there's any that haven't turned this podcast off because they're so pissed off, please email me, office@evanbrand.com. Seriously, and we could do this. We'll run oats on you, and we'll look at this, maybe blood too if we want to.
Or two twins. Two twins would be even better. Like,
okay, that's a good idea.
If we could find a twin study and recreate the thing on the BBC and have somebody go animal-based and somebody go vegan, that'd be great.
Okay, you have a bigger audience that you could pull from.
We'll put it out. I
could pull my audience too. We're looking for twins. So
we're looking for twins, guys. We're going to release this on both podcasts, Evan, hopefully, because this is a fun one.
All right, good deal. So we'll wrap this thing up. I know that in the beginning we said, okay, we're going to hit the topic of why is it the most dangerous time ever to be a vegetarian vegan. I hope that you guys have hit it. You've got it in your head now. I know we've went down some other rabbit holes, but this all ties back to these basic ancestral principles that our ancestors have done, that your ancestors are now rolling in their grave if you're not doing these things. So as your business partner, and I'd say your mentor and your friend, Brian Johnson, a.k.a. Liver King, says, go earn that shit. And embrace your ancestors. I can't remember all the things he says. I love watching the things he says because it makes my day. But it's the suffering too. It's to suffer like your ancestors. It's to live like your ancestors. It's like we don't suffer enough. We suffer, but it's in other ways. We don't suffer in a good way. He's saying like a good suffering. We're suffering in a bad way because we're nutrient deprived and we're eating chicken salad.
Yeah, chicken salad chicks is giving women who are worried about getting fat chicken salads when in fact they should be eating meat and organs instead of chicken salads. But yeah, we do need to it, and we do need to suffer. We do need to work hard. I think that's what it's about. I don't think we need to do quite the level of Brian Johnson's workouts, but after this podcast, I'm going to go do some Nordic curls and some pull-ups before I do my animal-based meal. So thanks for this one, brother. It was fun. I think we covered a lot. It's kind of a fun, meandering podcast. I think we covered the topic of why it's a dangerous time to be a vegan and vegetarian. Don't forget, it's also a very dangerous time to be a pescatarian because of heavy metals and because of microplastics in fish. People are always asking me, what about fish? I did a reel on Instagram. This is why fish is bullshit. Or in some cases, it's perhaps not, but I wouldn't make the majority of your diet fish because it's a real problem. Heavy metals are there. And then some people are in the comments saying, oh, but when it's raw, you don't absorb the metals. Bullshit. You're going to absorb the metals no matter what. People have definitely gotten Hatterism, which is a medical term for mercury poisoning named after the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland, from sushi. So raw fish will not prevent you from getting heavy metal toxicity. And just so all of you guys know this, the vast majority of sushi is farm raised, which means PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls. Oh, bullshit. No bueno.
The farm fish is terrible. I mean, I've looked into it. And the raw thing, I've never heard that in my life. They're saying raw fish would somehow avoid the toxicity. That's absolutely insane. I've fortunately seen a lot of people that have recovered from pescatarian diets, but you're not exaggerating. You know, people think that maybe that sounds like an exaggeration. Like, how could a pescatarian diet be dangerous? That's like healthy. It's like Mediterranean. It's fish and olives. But I've seen it on paper. I've tested these people. I've got the clinical data to show it to you. Luckily, you can reverse it. You can get this stuff out. But what's the first step? Remove the source. So I rarely eat fish. If I do, it's like, that wasn't even that good anyway. Like, beef is way better than fish. Like, my best fish meal does not compare to my worst beef meal.
I love that. I can think of one good meal of fish that I've had probably in my life. I've had some good sushi. I've had some good raw wild salmon, which has to be frozen and thawed because there's a tapeworm in wild salmon called Diphyllobothrum. You cannot eat raw salmon. That's wild. But that's not what I'm thinking of. One time I had king salmon cooked over a wood fire. That was actually pretty good, but it might have approached a moderately good ribeye steak, but it certainly wasn't better than a good ribeye steak. And that's the only time out of all the times I've had fish that it even began to approach it. And I've never had any fish that was anywhere near as good as that. So I would agree with you. Like, my best fish meal is only as good as like my mediocre steak meal.
It just never sits in my gut as good either. There's a weird feeling in my gut. Like beef, it's like, yeah. Fish is like, oh, like, did I actually eat anything?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not a fan of anchovies or sardines because they're oxidized and they're sitting in oils and they're no good. So whatever.
Yep.
Thanks,
well, let's wrap this up.
This one. Yeah, let's wrap it up.
And for folks listening, if Paul ended up putting it on his podcast, and you already know about his podcast, but if it's just on mine and you're listening there, then you can check it out. His podcast is called Fundamental Health with Dr. Paul Saladino. It's a great episode that we've done on mold. We did one on ivermectin too. That was pretty cool. So there's good content there. There's many other great episodes besides mine, like the water one is great. So check those out. And then most importantly, I would say follow him on Instagram because he has a lot of great content. If you guys are busy and you're like, okay, I just want the quick fix. He does like funny stuff like grocery store videos. Those are fun. I enjoy those. There's beach videos. There's videos of just the cornucopia of amazing foods that's on the table because some people complain to me, Evan, this is so restrictive. How does he do this? Doesn't he get bored? I'm like, just go watch his friggin' videos. Does he look bored? Does he look like he's sick of it? Or does he look like he's enjoying it? So I push a lot of people there because I get exhausted trying to explain to people why this is not restrictive, why this is sustainable, why this is the way that you want to do it, because I'm coming from a little different crowd than yours. Some of the people I'm talking with, they've already been to like 10, 20 practitioners. They're 50 and up, and maybe they didn't even know about Instagram yet or they haven't been on it. And so when I push them and they see your videos, they're like, okay, I can do this. And so I just want to commend you and tell you thank you because you're inspiring like you're inspiring. Like I have women in their 70s that like watch your videos now, and they're like, these videos are freaking awesome. So
awesome. I'm so glad it's helpful. So glad it's helpful. And if people need organs, you don't want to do the fresh stuff, you can check us out at heartandsoil.co. Like I mentioned, I give them to my sister and my mom and my dad because they won't eat fresh organs, but organs are such a critical part. My sister puts them in my niece and nephew's food. And Evan, I want to give you a high five back, brother. Whenever anybody asks me, like, who do I talk to about mold? I send them your way. So if you guys have questions about mold, need a functional medicine practitioner to work with, reach out to Evan or his team and check him out because he's working on his Instagram too. He needs some love. What is it? Mr. Evan Brand. And then you've got your podcast called the Evan Brand Show.
Yeah. Called the Evan Brand Show. 10 years this
10
year.
years, bro. I was listening to Evan when I was like in residency before I was even doing a podcast, probably even in medical school. I was listening to you, man. So you go way back for me. So it's a good collaboration. I always appreciate talking to you.
Awesome. My pleasure, man. Take it easy.
Thanks, brother.
See ya. Bye.